Ki te uru, whakataka te au ki te tonga, ki mā kina ki uta, ki mā taratara ki tai. E he aki ana, te atukura, he tiu, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora. Morena everyone, and thank you for being here and online. I have a few apologies for lateness. We have Councillor Newman and the Mayor on council business. Don't have any absence. And don't have early departure.
Here I'm on.
Oh, who was? I didn't hear who
it's
that
Councillor Newman. I'm online.
Oh, kia ora, Daniel. Kia ora, Councillor Newman. You're not late then. Perfect.
I've got Councillor Henderson on lateness on council business as well.
Oh yes, Councillor Henderson messaged me this morning. Sorry, he won't be far away. Right. So could I have a mover for that? Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ferry will second. All those in favour? Any declarations? No. Confirmation of the minutes. Deputy Chair, would you like to move? Any a seconder?
So happy to, Richard.
Councillor Sayers, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? No. All those in favour? There are no petitions. We had one public input request, but it was for the next meeting, so we have no public input today, and we do have a local board input straight to there. We have Greg Presland, Chair of the Waitakere Rangers Local Board. Nice to see you, Greg. You could just come up, and we have the, you just want to click your microphone on, and you have your phone.
Chair, sorry, did you take the apologies?
Oh, yes.
You did?
Yes.
Yep, okay. Could I just add to that, just for the minute, that I'll need to make an apology for an early departure around about 11, but I'll be able to come back online, and I'm being sent a link to that, Chair. So just want to
thank you,
Thank you.
We'll include that. Thank you. Kia ora, Chair President, if you just want to click your mic on, thank you.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to speak today, and I wish to speak in relation to the agenda item covering the latest version of the Waitakere Rangers Heritage Area Monitoring Report. Just very briefly, in terms of background, the heritage area is pretty well totally contained in the Waitakere Rangers Local Board area, apart from a couple of strips in Faux and in Rodney, and in fact it can be described as the dominant feature of our local board area. The genesis of the Act which created the heritage area was a famous report by Dr. Morgan Williams, who was then the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, in which he predicted that if things did not change, then the Waitakere Rangers would suffer death by 1,000 cuts. And he predicted that with incremental change to district plans and the failure of the RMA to deal with cumulative effects of development, and development occurring on a case-by-case basis, eventually there would be fundamental change to the heritage area for the worse. And the heritage area was an attempt to address these concerns. The bill was proposed by Waitakere City as a local bill and became law in 2008. In very simple terms, its purpose is to recognise the national, regional and local significance of the heritage area and to promote the protection and enhancement of its heritage features for present and future generations. And it does this by establishing objectives which are essentially protective, and it then requires Council to give effect to the Act's purpose and objectives when changing regional or district plans, including the unitary plan, and when considering certain consent applications affecting the heritage area. And as I mentioned in our recent submission to Council on the budget, there's a strong argument that Council has to have particular regard to the provisions of the Act when making budgetary decisions concerning the heritage area. An important discipline imposed by the Act is for Council to prepare a report every 5 years, and that report must monitor the state of the environment, progress being made towards achieving the objectives, and the funding impact arising from activities to be undertaken specifically to give effect to the Act. And the intent behind the report is clearly to work out what is happening, and if adverse trends start to occur, then alarm bells should go off and Council should respond. My submission is that this latest report is a well-designed synopsis of what is happening in the Waitakere Ranges, and it gives me cautious optimism that the Act is working as intended. I have to concede it's been a tough 5 years. Physical and emotional impact of 5 years of drought, COVID-19 restrictions, and a series of storm and flood events cannot help but be felt by us all. And we need no reminder that we need to acknowledge and prepare for global pressures which are changing our climate and changing the world we live in. The heritage area is not immune to this, and the personal and collective impact of flooding and slips on homes and communities are constant reminders of this. That being said, this report contains much to be positive about. I'm pleased the purposes of the Act, which are to promote the protection and enhancement of the heritage features for present and future generations, is occurring. And I'm also pleased that our forest ecosystems continue to regenerate and that there are gains in bird numbers and other indicators which show ecosystem improvements. It's vital that this improvement continues, and this is a subject that needs to be considered when Council formulates the next 10-year budget. I am concerned the heritage area is not adequately resourced, and the need for further resourcing is very visible in key areas such as the environment and infrastructure. Current and future decisions about funding need to consider the heritage area's immediate and long-term needs. The heritage area is a taonga, it is special, and it deserves and needs our continued support. Can I thank the officers involved, particularly Raymond Curran and Erin Shields, for the work that they put into the preparation of the report. And one further comment, I'm aware that Te Karawa Maki are keen to progress the deed of acknowledgement proposed by the Act, and there are many locals keen to see this advanced as well. Dr. Morgan Williams urged us to develop a strong, self-reinforcing vision of how the community wants the Waitaku Ranges to be in the future, and progress on this deed would help us to develop that vision. We generally endorse the report, and we hope that the next report is also positive. And finally, we request governing body and senior managers to strongly consider the report and its findings during preparation of the long-term plan. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. Questions for Councillor Turner?
Morning, Mr. Preston. You're probably going to anticipate my questions and I'm going to anticipate your answers, but for the sake of the meeting. So you primarily spoke about in an environmental protection manner, but it is correct that the features of the Act have social features as well, correct?
Yes, they certainly do.
And you did talk about the community, what the community sees in the coming from the Rangers Heritage Area, but the objectives also acknowledge that people live and work in distinct communities within the area, and it's going to enable their social, economic, and their economic, I've lost all the words. Cultural, thank you, well-being. Yeah?
Yes.
So where do you see all that fitting into what you've just said?
I was around when the Act was consulted on, and and that was quite a controversial time where there were two very strong views, one side very protective and the other side really concerned that the Act would stifle social, community and economic activity. I believe that now things have settled down and most people out west actually really like living in the heritage area. So economic activity continues. Cultural activity, I believe, is on steroids. The quality of our art I'm parochial about, but I think it's extraordinarily good. And people like living there. So I don't see that the Act is having a negative effect on that at all. In fact, most Westies are proud to live in the heritage area.
Myself included, and I have admitted to you before, the Act is working relatively well, but there are some pieces I see as being left out. So our track network, which the Act sees as being for all the people of Auckland, where would you, how much more investment would you like to see in that?
To be frank, the track network right now is a mess because of the storms, and there's certainly a great desire amongst locals for us to get back to the situation that we had before the storms. But that's going to take money and time.
But I'm glad we're getting back there. Thank you.
Kia ora, councillor. Are there any other questions? Oh, sorry, Member Ashby.
Kia ora, Greg. Very good to see you. Thank you for your submission. Like you, I'm glad to see some signs of regeneration and the Act generally doing as intended in terms of stopping inappropriate subdivision and things like that, which has done a very good job of. I'm interested in any specific things that you think could be done to whakamana or lift up the Act, what things that Council could do to actually implement it even more strongly in terms of its referring to its national significance, of course, and in particular its enhancement objectives, which are right up top of it. So do you have any comment on that in terms of some?
Yes, certainly there's a big long list of things that I'd love to see achieved. One simple one is weeds. Titirangi got smashed over by the recent storms, and it seems pretty clear to me that weed-infested banks were some of the most vulnerable banks that gave way. And so there's, I believe, not only an environmental imperative to deal with weeds, but also a social and an economic one. Local board, we put in up to around about $500,000 a year in different weed projects, and that's not enough. We're only just holding on. So I would love to see further funding so that we could actually try and get on top of our weed problem. And just one further comment that the originally proposed cuts would devastate that spend, and it's the sort of spend where you've got to keep doing it year on year just to stay where you are, and you can't take a year out, otherwise you just lose years and years of work. So that's one very specific area where I think we need to do better.
So it would be fair to say the if the original budget proposal went through, the integrity of that area, which is again nationally significant under legislation, would be at threat in terms of weeds, at least, the biodiversity.
Certainly, and it rolls back to the stability of the area. So we've got, with these storms that are going to come at us time and time again now, we need to really rethink that and work out how we can make the area more stable and more resilient.
Thanks. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Member Ashby. Last question, Councillor Sayers.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for coming along and making a presentation today, very worthwhile. I'm just asking this question to give you an opportunity, if you want to answer it, and the idea is to if you wanted to expand it, or you've talked from a local board, wearing your local board hat quite a lot, but in terms, I know that the Rodney ward has benefits from it. If you want to talk about how you see the wider Auckland region benefiting, and perhaps as Member Ashby's talked about the wider, it's a national benefit. So just an opportunity if you want to comment on that area.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Sayers. It's a big topic. In terms of urban form, I think the West is in reasonably good shape. So we've got intensification happening in the urban area, and we've got a buffer zone where there's very little intensification and stability. And my personal view is we need to think about similar sorts of protection for other vulnerable areas, such as Pukekohe. Dare I say it, Commute. So I think that model of if you want an intensified city, then you really need to think about having these sorts of planning mechanisms in place.
Kia ora, Councillor. Right, so thank you, Chair President. Just want to acknowledge yourself and the local board for all the work that you and the advocacy you all do for the Waitakere Ranges. Obviously it's a regional park, but you are very connected and part of it, and you treat it as your local park as well. So we really, really acknowledge the partnership that everyone plays, and the local board's advocacy is strong and will continue through to the long-term plan and 10-year budget, whatever we want to call it, to make sure those budgets are there to uphold the Act. So thank you very much. Councillor Turner, would you like to move? Thanks. And Member Ashby, would you like to second? Right. Thank you, Greg. All those in favour? Aye. Any opposed? No. Thank you. Right, we'll go straight on to the Waitakere Ranges Heritage... Oh, sorry, there's no extraordinary business. I always forget extraordinary business. We'll go straight on to the Waitakere Ranges Heritage Area 5-year monitoring report. And we've got Erin and Raywin. If you could come up to the table and just click your mics on and off when you need to, and maybe introduce yourselves and your roles. Thank you. You just might need to bring those mics a little closer to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, councillors, IMSB members. By way of introduction, if you haven't met me, I'm Erin Shields, Team Leader Northwest, and I have been working in the Waitakere Ranges area for the last...
Point of order, sorry. I find it very hard to hear on these side conversations. I think it's quite rude to the presenters.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, so I've been working in this space.
Councillor Ferry just asked if we could stop the side chat and then it continued. Thank you, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, officers.
Thank you. And it's my pleasure today to introduce Raywin Curran, who is currently the Senior Local Board Advisor at the Waitakere Ranges Local Board. And Raywin has been seconded to our team for this financial year to be the lead author of this report and has been supported by other staff. And I'll hand over to her, and she has a short presentation. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Kia ora, everyone. Yeah. So it sounds like that you've had a bit of a talk with Greg about this. We'll just run through a short overview of relationships in the heritage area, the purpose of the report, why it's come to place, and run through the summary conclusions. So apologies if we're repeating anything. If we could, do I manage this or? Other way. Other way. Okay. There's technical incompetencies coming to play. The to you. Okay, and ta-da. Okay, so the action sought, were approval of the monitoring report and to delegate ability for minor errors, and you've just been through that. The report purpose is statutory. The Heritage Area Act 2008, the Waitakere Ranges Heritage Area Act, requires us to report on 5-yearly intervals on particularly the state of the environment, Council's progress towards achieving the objectives of the Act and the funding impacts from activities undertaken. And strategically, it helps to assess the ongoing impact of the activities in the heritage area and as you mentioned before, can be used to inform your 10-year plans and budget conversations. So this is the 3rd year report, 2 earlier reports, 2018 and 2020, and 2013. For this one, it's dated at the moment 2023. It's good to just be aware that the content of the report is aligned to the Council's financial year, so it actually covers the period 2017 to 2022, and I think that we will change that in the title of the report to make it clearer, particularly given the events early in 2023. So the Act sets the boundaries of the heritage area. It says that it's nationally, regionally and locally significant, and it seeks to promote, protect and enhance the heritage features. And it sets out a number of objectives for how that might happen, and how to avoid adverse effects on various aspects of it, and also in relation to how people live in it. And an approach is set out for the way that can happen, as well as the relationship with it to the Resource Management Act, which is, in most circumstances, the primary has precedence over the Heritage Area Act. So this is just a quick overview of where it is, if you don't know. 2 coastlines, a city border. I like this map because it shows the fairly mountainous and extreme nature of the landscape, in comparison to perhaps the slightly more settled nature of inner Auckland. So 27,700 hectares approximately, and got an 18,000 hectare regional park, 6,800 hectares of designated water supply catchments, and that includes the 5 dams in the area, which supply approximately 19% of the city's water. Some of those dams are pretty old. I believe that one of them has just had a 100-year anniversary, and there are some ongoing. Watercare has some plans in place for replacing some of the water treatment plants over the next few years. So there's about 21,000 residents, and over 17,000 live in the Eastern Foothills. And we've said Eastern Foothills, but it's really the area which is kind of stretching up towards Titirangi in the right, and works all the way along that urban border before it hits Rodney. Okay, so the governance and management arrangements. Member Pressland has just talked about the local board's role. One thing about the heritage area, the Act was put in place in 2008. The council was created in 2009, and there isn't an explicit alignment between the heritage area and any particular function of council. So we have, just acknowledging Edward, we have Te Kaurau Maki and Ngāti Whātua mana whenua in the area. I haven't put their scope of interest on this map because it extends much longer, much further out. One thing about that I would like to say is the Act sets in place, it enables a deed of acknowledgement to be agreed between Te Kaurau Maki and Council, and also Ngāti Whātua. It doesn't specify which part of Ngāti Whātua, it just talks broadly there. And as yet, those haven't been put in place. So governance responsibility, the governing body, 3 local boards, and most of the areas in the Waitakere boundary, and of course, in line with council functions, most operational functions and decision makings are delegated to council employees. Auckland Transport maintains the road, DOC manages several small areas of parkland, and those are the pieces that you can see mostly in those sort of darker green areas. So although DOC is probably the primary department that's linked to the Act, its operational functions are actually quite limited. And then, of course, the residents and visitors have a stewardship role under the Act as well. So the report, 2017 to 2023 to 22 is quite an extraordinary period of time. So this is obviously before 2023, 2018-21 flash flooding events severely affected particularly Piha, but also the foothills area, and there were some damages to home and properties there, and sadly some loss of life as well. The road network is subject to quite a lot of slips, and those have been made very visible in those events, but are probably probably have a long-term nature as well. In 2018, the forested areas and the tracks were closed to control the curry dieback threat, and then within the same period, the track reopening program was carried out, and up until December 2022, that was working reasonably well. The drought in 2019-2020 brought dam levels to historic lows, and of course we had the pandemic restrictions on the resident population and council staff working in the heritage area. At the same time, visitor counts increased, and this number is taken from the Regional Parks Management Plan, and it's since 2011 there's been an increase from 491,000 in the regional park alone to approximately 1.2 million per year. And I understand that the COVID restrictions and things played a part in that afterwards. So that sounds like a lot of doom and gloom. However, it's some of the findings of the report are actually quite reasonable in that context. So this is just to give you an idea of the scope of and the impact of something like that. So we have the dam in 2019 during the drought, and in October 2021, which is actually a month after the flood events. So it had calmed down quite a bit then. I won't run you word for word through the summary conclusions, but essentially just in monitoring what we've done is pin this down to 5 key areas. The first being around the funding implications. The second, looking at the community and built cultural heritage impact. The third is effects of change on the landscape and land use. Then the heritage area is a public and private place where a lot of the things that I've just mentioned actually play out in terms of decision making and cause and effect. And finally, the state of the environment, which sits at the end of the report. So the funding is an area of interest to the local board and to many of its communities. It's not funded for separately, and because of the structure, and it follows the structure of council is really all that there's to be said there. So there's an enormous variety of management activities taking place, quite a lot of monitoring. It's very difficult to go in and say, we spent $10 here or we spent $20. It's because of the way that things are accounted for within the department budgets, but things do get to where they need to get to. Community stewardship is very visible, and as Member Preslin said earlier, there's quite a lot of that apparent, particularly around the environment, and all of these sectors are very strong. There's an enormous list of groups who take an active part here, and just as interesting background more than anything for the heritage area, a lot of the emergency services and things are actually carried out by residents and volunteers. So we have the fire services all manned by locals by and large, and the surf clubs which carry out the monitoring of the beaches and are dealing with a lot of the impacts of visitors are also locally run. The next slide. Again, minor change in the condition of the landforms and landscapes, and many examples of positive ones. And we've mentioned, the slips observed, and one of the interesting points in the report is just noticing that REMU did a did a survey of slips in the Waitakere Ranges in general in 2022, and they observed about 150 more slips than there had been in 2017. So that includes the roads, but also the more remote places. Again, the impact of activities on the regional park is pretty well understood, and I'd expect that people here would have a good overview of that. There's been the closures, the rāhui, and that combination of all those other visitor pressures and COVID have increased pressure, but things have been progressing well. And finally, the state of the environment. The monitoring program is actually become pretty comprehensive over time, and they're seeing some very good outcomes there. I would like to point to something which is, that although the outcomes are great, it doesn't mean that everything is in perfect condition, and quite a lot of these environments remain quite vulnerable. I'll leave you with this, which just is a very quick kind of prompt to the varied nature of the region, and perhaps to the contrast with urban Auckland. And I'll just point out one or two slides, which perhaps on the bottom left you can see the view of housing looking from the foothills towards urban Auckland. So there's quite a shift there between the heritage area foothills and looking out onto urban Glen Eden and Henderson. And the nature of perhaps the road network, you can see there a pretty good example of a site which indicates what has to be dealt with in terms of renewals and repairs. I think I'll leave that with you and finish there.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, Raymond and Erin. Huge amount of work, significant amount of work, obviously for a 5-year monitoring report as well, but really appreciate all the work that's been done here and the fact that we have it on paper for us to make sure we're doing the right thing for the Waitakere Ranges, but also knowing and being able to celebrate the progress along the way. We have 4 questioners so far, so Member Hirare online.
Kia ora, Chief. Thank you. Just a quick question on why are we so slow to get the deeds of acknowledgement up and running between Ngāti Whātua and Te Kauara Wamaki?
Through the chair, thanks for that question, Councillor IMSB member. The report is prepared by the Plans and Places Department, and so we are not part of the governance team that are working on the development and agreement of the deeds of acknowledgement. This issue came up as part of the 2018 report as well. The legislation never set a time frame for the completion or agreement of deeds, and so there has been some limited progress made. As to why, I'm not able to answer that question, really.
So you want the IMSB to say yes to the recommendation, but you come to the meeting and you don't even know where we are with deeds of acknowledgement. I find it unusual.
Yeah, so the monitoring report is a wide-ranging report, and the deeds of acknowledgement are one aspect of this. What we have consistently tried to do is present the warts and all situation as it is in terms of the Waitakere Ranges, and we've been free and frank with the local board about where the council is delivering and where it may not be achieving as well as it could be. So we've presented the fact that there is only very limited progress on the deeds of acknowledgement. We think that is an appropriate and honest thing to say.
In the report, when you say when you mention that there's been little or no progress on the deeds of acknowledgement, is there a reasoning behind why we are where we are or where we're not? You know, is there a fuller explanation of the reasons why? I mean, there are some of us who think we know why.
Okay. Through the chair, I might hand over to Warren McLennan, who's joined me at the table to assist with this question.
Morning, Warren.
Good morning, Member Hinari. Thanks for the question. We have been working with the governance section of Council to get some work going on this. Unfortunately, John Hutton is not with the Council anymore full time, but and so we had got a very small part of the way there, but I think that what we can take out of this 5-year monitoring report is that the Council needs to look at how it can progress this this deed in a more expedient way. I concur with your comments.
Thank you, Warren.
Kia ora, thank you, and good question, Member Hennaday, and I'm happy to look offline too about if there is anything we can do as a committee to expedite or speed up or work with to make sure that process is happening quicker. Member Ashby.
Kia ora. Thank you both for the presentation, and I know the hard work behind the scenes. I know there's a large volume of rather disparate data you've had to pull together into the monitoring report. So, yeah, first wanted to thank you for those long hours of work. I guess there's two lines of questioning I have, and I'll start with the I guess highest level objectives of the Act, which was setting up a nationally significant area, and you had a bullet point up there around the governance of it being some council and local board, and you don't know where the budget. There's no sort of one budget for it. It's just a whole bunch of, I don't know, smoke and mirrors. It works itself out somehow apparently, but all of that seems to me pretty lackluster for what's essentially a nationally significant area, where we're supposed to not be just holding the line, but actually enhancing all of those heritage objectives, the natural environment, the community ones, the iwi ones, all of these different things. And I know as officers you don't have a magic wand, you can't sort of make that happen, but it just seems kind of, to be honest, that you know, these reports come up every 5 years, and it seems, notwithstanding your very good work, but in an organisational way, like an afterthought, like, oh yeah, there's that act in the background. It's sort of nationally significant. To turn this into a question, where is the thinking, where is the work in a joined up way on council to actually give full effect to the national significance and the enhancement objectives of this statutory area? Because I don't think it's there right now.
Through the chair, if I could perhaps begin the answer. The Waitakere Ranges Local Board does a lot of work to join up its decision making and its allocation of its budgets with all of the departments and the CCOs. And so there's a great deal of work that goes into each and every annual plan for the local board. So through that mechanism, the local board gets to see and have oversight of the regionally based budgets. And so budgets such as the regional parks, where our regional colleagues are devising how much budget goes to each of the regional parks. And so the local board gets to see that sort of information and can argue the case of the Waitakere Ranges Regional Park and its share of those annual budgets. So it is perhaps more of a local board up rather than a governing body down approach to the budgeting. Does that partially answer your question?
It's an answer, and I understand it's the only one you can really give because there's not an alternative, but it's not the answer I'm looking for. But that's okay. The second, I guess, line of questioning I have was in the Māori space, and you'll already know where I'm coming from with this. So obviously, member Henare, my colleagues talked about the deed and progress on that. So we're in year 15 post legislation. So by the time the next 5-year monitoring report comes around, that's a whole generation of little kawerau or little Ngāti Whātua kid that was born and has grown up and is going to uni and still no deed. So that to me is pretty appalling. Treaty settlements have been done in faster time than that. So I can't, there's a big issue there. The other element is some of the feedback from kawerau has been, in addition to in the previous monitoring reports, in addition to the deed, was around collaborating on cultural indicators or KPIs, developing that up so that the reporting framework encompassed Te Ao Māori, which a lot of other policies and statutes are directing councils to do, and that would lead into a Te Ao Māori framework of reporting, or the two worldviews sitting alongside each other. So again, not undermining any of the hard work that's gone in the background, but just in terms of that Māori lens, and I know because I was the one that did it, kawerau have submitted on these elements for pretty much every annual plan and LTP submission for as long, for probably 10 years, and none of those things have been progressed. So there's a national significance element that I don't think is being met, and maybe that's a part of a council conversation with central government, but there's also that Ngāti Whātua and kawerau piece of how you make the reporting reflect partnership a little more strongly, and one of those is through the deed, but it's also through how it's actually framed. So again, there's probably not a question in there, my apologies, but other than how do we do that, because it's too late clearly for this one, but we don't want to be sitting here in 5 years having the same conversation. So how do we get there?
Through the chair, I sat here 5 years ago and we had the same conversation, Edward, and what you're describing is correct and not ideal. The report is, and we've discussed this with the local board as well, is a synthesis of council reporting across all of its departments. And so while it is not explicit what you are seeking in terms of cultural indicators, I know for a fact that there's a great deal of engagement and agreement with Te Kaurau and Ngāti Whātua over the nature and extent of operational activities in the ranges. And so that is as good as it gets at the moment in terms of approaching monitoring on a cultural indicators basis. There is some inherent aspects of how the two iwi see the ranges through the work program in the ranges, if that's useful.
Thank you. No, I again just want to thank you for your work. Don't think we're quite there yet. Don't think I'm unfortunately in a place to support it, but I do want to thank you for all of your work.
Kia ora. Thank you, Member Ashby. And it's clear to me that we need to do some work as a committee. So I'm proposing, I assume Councillor Turner and Member Ashby would like to move the monitoring reports resolutions, but if either of you are okay, I'd like to add a third resolution in there. So happy to move if you don't want to move, but request advice on progressing the deeds of acknowledgement to be agreed between Te Kawerau Āmake and Ngāti Whātua and the Crown or Council and report back to committee. Would that help, Member Ashby, as part of it?
Chair, if I may butt in.
Yes.
I actually think it's inappropriate for my colleague Ashby
Oh, right.
to. It's just a sort of bit of a conflict.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm uneasy about that.
Okay, so happy to take it offline if that is a more beneficial way to do it.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful, but I can't.
Right.
I can't move it.
No.
Right. Well, good. So if would you be okay with that, Councillor Turner? Okay, so I've got 3 more questions. Councillor Turner's first. I floated that. If that's not going to work, we will do the work offline regardless, but I think it's important there. Also, part of the issue is with a monitoring report, it doesn't often tell a full story of what's next or all the work happening. It's sort of more a snapshot of the data and the evidence, but I take the point that I'm hearing that we need to be clearer and progress these things. We are looking to have a workshop soon on regional parks in general and thrash out issues right across. So I'm hoping this will be part of that as well in the next month or 2. So thank you. Councillor Turner, questions at this point?
Thank you very much. So the heritage area is, in practical terms, very distinct between the regional park and all the public lands which it covers. Do you think the Act affords us the ability to almost separate our reporting on between those 2 areas so we can apply, a different scale of lens or a different lenses to the 2 separate areas?
Through the chair, if I could check, when you say 2 different areas, do you mean the areas that are designated for the regional park and the separate designation for the water care facilities?
No, I mean the fact that we have 27,700 hectares inside the heritage area boundaries, but but of that, 18,000 hectares is regional park.
Okay.
So I see a distinct difference between the regional park, which started off as the Auckland Memorial Reserve, and was put together over a period of time to celebrate Auckland's 100th celebration, and all the areas outside of it.
All right. Thanks, Councillor Turner. I'll just just if I'm not answering your question, just let me know. So, in terms of separating out the area, I mean functionally that's already what happens because of the the nature of the governance framework and the fact that you have the area overlapped by the local board and also overlapped by the governing body responsibilities. So in many respects, that I think that's actually what is happening now. We have quite a separate system for looking at the regional park and also looking at the local board. So are you, can I ask, what is are you thinking about it in terms of how you'd fund it?
So, no, I'm thinking of terms of impact. So we have a mixture of features one of the features is the wilderness experience and the recreational and way we can relax within the regional parks and the Waitakere Ranges and the heritage area. And then we have the impacts on the people who live there by some of the actions we have, where we've got closed tracks, we've reduced the track by area, we're focusing people to destination points, which is having an impact on the local people who live in the area. So what I'm trying to say is, we monitor the features against our objectives, but surely we can extrapolate that out to where this report can actually campaign, advocate for practical change, you know, over and above just saying giving us more money. So you make the comment, deaths by 1,000 cuts. We're losing our tracks, deaths by 1,000 cuts. And that's against the objectives of the Act, which recognises our access to the area.
So, in responding to that, I guess, you know, I mentioned earlier in the presentation that there are times at which achieving one objective will not necessarily achieve another objective, and there is flexibility within the Act for that to happen over a limited period of time. So I think, you know, while I understand and you know, really agree with your reflections and commentary on it, I'm not sure that there, in terms of the reporting, that there's anything that can be said around that other than to reflect it as something that happens.
I think your report has reflected it happens. I just wanted to see if we can use this report to help. We're talking about the deeds of acknowledgement. We're talking about using this report as a springboard. I want to see there's plenty of springboards this report has put its feet on that we could activate from this report, and I'd like to see those activations take place. Last question, please. I note that the Act says there can be more than one deed of acknowledgement. In some places we talk about deeds, and other places we talk about it in the singular. I'd like to ask for a workshop on the deeds of acknowledgement, because, you know, we may end up with multiple deeds of acknowledgement in time. And I also see there's a list of criteria here, so it's quite, yeah. So I'd like to learn a lot about the deeds of acknowledgement as we move forward into this. So that, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Turner, was that a question or?
Yeah, can you give us can you come back with a workshop on that, please?
Yeah, through the chair. That might be a matter that our governance teams pick up. It's being plans and places where we are humble town planners. We're not necessarily the governance advisors. Yeah.
So through the chair, I ask that of you then.
Yes, so I foreshadowed the amendment, but I think we'll leave it, or the staff have heard, we're going to make sure that comes back. I'll just make sure we have a timeline on that, because it's clear we need to be doing a lot of work. The difficulty with a 5-year monitoring report, it's largely about reporting what's happened based on evidence and data, rather than pointing to what's going to happen and how we can address it. So it's a little bit, you know, we will connect the two. Obviously, this is a great report for staff to be kind of triggered to do work and progress work, but we need to bring that. Yeah. So in the next couple of months, we are having a regional parks workshop and focus, but I think part of that needs to be either this or there's a whole separate body of work specifically on that issue. But I hear you, Councillor, and Member Ashby, and the different wants and needs you're hearing from the community as well. So yeah, and that's exactly what I'm hearing. So thank you, Councillor Ferry.
I think my question would probably be better for a workshop, so I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Perfect. And feel free to send them through to us too. So, Councillor Walker.
Sure. Just have a question really following on from the comments of Member Ashby, which I take to be an advancement of the heritage value, so that we're actually restoring and improving things rather than just maintaining somewhat of a status quo. I mean, this might well be the subject of a workshop, but it isn't apparent to me that there's sort of exception reporting around how we're actually enhancing the heritage of the area, certainly as far as the vegetation's concerned and elsewhere. Rather, I see some negatives. I think 40 hectares loss of canopy, the installation of that cell tower at Bethel's, and the painting of the fire stations white and so on. I mean, they may appear little, but they all add up. Any comment there, Erin?
Through the chair, we did try to provide some case studies and snapshots of individual aspects. So you'll see some of those through the report. If we could have had more time, we might have found more of those enhancement types activities. So yeah, there is more good news and those enhancements than are reported in the document. Yeah.
The other question I've got is just around the volunteer hours and the like that are occurring. I mean, I used to be on Ark in the Park. Are you on that, Councillor Turner? Ark in the Park?
No, I'm not, but I need to ask the chair about that. We were going to appoint someone from council.
So, I mean, I know that the pest control and the like is hugely dependent on the volunteer hours, and the hours are absolutely colossal, but again, it's not, it isn't picked up in here, and obviously the goodwill of the people that live in the area, so I just toss that in. Quite obviously, we've got our State of the Environment report, which in part covers over these things, but I mean, this is Waitakere specific. So do you think there's a need to bump up some of that reporting in this?
Thanks, Councillor Walker. The things that you mentioned are throughout the report. So perhaps I. Okay. So the volunteer hours and the commitment are kind of are mentioned in various places in the report, which is perhaps why you're not seeing them as a specific area. So in relation to the environment, there is actually, there's a number of maps later on which might be of interest to you, which just sort of really pick out the scope and the scale of that. We had information from one of the, from Pest Free Waitakere, which talked about the scale of their volunteering activities, and I apologise, I'm just drawing an immediate blank on the exact number of hours, but there were, they have looked at over 27 of the groups that they're looking for and tried to turn that into an expression of monetary terms. And that was, yeah, and I think that's probably a focused way of kind of thinking about a voluntary activity, because clearly in the across many across many of the activities in the report, people are putting in a lot of hours. So I'm agreeing with you.
In page 37, it does say the approximate.
I have read that.
Yeah.
Sure.
The 57,000 hours in a quantum of almost 1.4 million a year.
Yeah, so it's an excellent observation, and the issue perhaps taking this forward is really around what happens to those groups in the future. One of the things about the Heritage Area Act and the report itself is that it's actually very difficult to pull apart any one particular feature or objective and report on it in the whole, because everything is so interconnected in terms of the community activation and the work that's done. So it's a good observation.
The other question I've got, and again, it's a while since I've been involved with Ark in the Park, but increasingly you've got large areas that are identified throughout New Zealand for pest eradication. There's a nationwide program around that as it goes to predator-free. And you've got large areas, Zealandia down in Wellington is a wonderful example, where you've got a sanctuary. And the progress of the sanctuary, in one respect, is around the release of various birds and wildlife and the like that would have once been in the area. So you can actually track how it's going. Do we apply any of these concepts to Waitakere as a whole? That is around the pest eradication overall, so that we've got an overall sanctuary objective for the area, and we measure how we're tracking on that.
Through the chair, I think the closest equivalent to Zealandia in Wellington is the work that is done in the Ark in the Park, where they have an extensive and ongoing pest control regime in the area that they identify as the Ark. We don't have anything similar to what happens at regional parks like Tawhanui, where there are predator fences.
Is there a reason why we're not applying that to this area? Because this is a preeminent area, really. It's got special heritage legislation.
The council's endeavours in the regional park and the wider heritage area are given strength through the budgets that are applied in terms of pest control and weed control, and so that happens at both a regional level and also through the local board. So that's sort of the nearest it gets, if that's useful.
Perhaps that's a subject for the workshop, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. We have one last question from Mayor Brown.
Thanks for this report. I just want to ask about on-site septic tank effluent disposal out there. Seemed to be something which was closely linked to the houses that had substantial slippage during the last extreme rainfall events. And I'm wondering whether or not that's in your purview of things you're looking at from an environmental point of view, because the people are building on steep sites with a clay layer that's overlaid a rock layer, and if you irrigate on-site effluent into that layer, you are greasing up the slope. And it was no great surprise. And some of the ones I looked at, there was pipes all over the place, and you could. And as an engineer, I felt that this was not contributing well, and I don't think the people there were seeing effluent disposal as being a part of soil stability and its linkage. And I don't know whether or not your group are perceiving or involved or thinking about that. But it is part of an environmental package, and I just wonder what your thoughts were on that.
Thanks for the question. So taking account of the fact that monitoring that we have done is to 2022, like it's 5 years back, I think the issue that you're raising will have been exacerbated since February, January, February, and it may be worth looking at that in a bit more detail, and that could be part of the work that Healthy Waters do, because they're the ones who have been administering the inspections of these wastewater on-site plants, both here and both in Waitakere and in Waiheke as well. So I'm happy to talk with them about seeing what we can do through the next monitoring of that.
Yeah, I'd like you to do that. There's what they call the USUM process, is what takes that out of sight, out of mind, and so that it disappeared until something goes wrong. But in fact, it is going wrong all the time, even when they're not looking at it. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Last question, Councillor Sayers.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just want to pick up on the last question and response there, just for clarification. I heard that there's the Waitakere and the islands mentioned there, Warren, but what about Rodney and the septic tank network throughout there? Would that fall into scope, potentially?
I don't think there has been the same level of scrutiny throughout Rodney, but again, let me have a talk with Healthy Waters.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so I'll get staff to move from the table. Thank you very much for all the work once again. Really appreciate that. If you just want to click that mic off there, Warren, thank you. Right, so we have left off that that resolution. It's on the we're aware of it, and staff will work on that regardless. Councillor Turner, did you want to? I've got you moving with Member Ashby. You fine to second? No, you don't want to. Cool. Sorry.
We're going to comments after we move.
So you don't want to move the monitoring report?
There's some things in it which are short of where they should be hitting, in my opinion, although I understand the staff's comments.
Okay. We'll just before you go into comment, I'll just move it. So Councillor Walker's happy to move. I'm happy to second, and we'll go into comment now. We have Member Henare first, and then Councillor Turner second. Thank you, Member Henare.
Kia ora, excuse me, kia ora, Chair. Look, I just wanted to make, I suppose, just a very short comment on what Member Ashby said. It's 15 years. In fact, I was in Parliament when this was first mooted and went through. And we haven't been able to, and I say we as a collective word, we haven't been able to get a deed of acknowledgement as per the Act. We are about to have to wait 5 more years for another monitoring report, and maybe, and I say maybe, there will be comment on the monitoring reports. I just think that in normal life, not one councillor would accept having to wait 15 years for something to be produced. It may not be the most important thing in our lives, but it is to some people. And what got me about Member Ashby's comments was that we now have another generation of people who have been born in this time, and we won't have a deed of acknowledgement for another 5 years or however long it's going to take. I'm actually dismayed, and it takes a lot for me to be dismayed. I mean, I'm a supporter of the Blues rugby team, and that word always comes up. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there, but you know where I'm going, and I suppose absolutely I'm going to call for a division, because I think somewhere along the line people need to put their hands up and be counted. Kia ora.
Kia ora tau. Kia ora, Member Henare, not tau, sorry. Thank you for that. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm somewhat supportive of Member Henare's comments. this reporting process has to come up with something. We have to have teeth from the process, and it has to springboard us into change, which improves what we've been monitoring. And I'll just go straight to what Mr. Mayor was saying. I sat here listening to his analysis of the situation, thinking that it is actually council bylaw and council controls which are causing this problem. There are a lot of people in the Waitakeris, the vulnerable parts, Kari, Piha, Huia, who are more than happy to try traditional or modern traditional technology like composting toilets, like things that actually do not discharge into the environment. But town planning rules, etc., stop you from doing that, and you're locked into systems which pump out, I saw a figure of water care, 253 litres of water per person per day. So I really want to see what this report falls short on, as Member Henare said, is teeth. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Walker.
So I just want to follow on from Councillor Turner. I agree with his all his comments. In a previous life, I used to sell and design composting toilets and the like, and I know where you're at. What concerns me, Mr. Chair, is really we need to be enhancing the circumstance out at the Waitakeris far more so than what we're doing. They've been hit phenomenally hard by the storms, and the Mayor's absolutely right. The circumstances around septic tanks and the whole management of water really need rapid assessment. I guess what I would suggest is a need for an overarching vision for the Waitakeris and some follow through on that. And I don't actually see that. It's a preeminent area. We should have, total pest eradication enhancement wherever we can. Obviously, dealing with the issues around stormwater and the like, and very much an eco-village approach in terms of the housing, so that everything is as soft on the landscape as possible in every way. And I do not see that. So I don't know how we do that, but it strikes me that there are a number of really good words in the Act. We need to follow through. And I guess what concerns me is the notion that we're strung up all the time by council budgets and the like. I really don't see that as the constraint. There's an entire community out there that will apply themselves if they're given the leadership. And Ken, I think you're up for that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Baker.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So, I mean, for me, we've been asked to basically accept a retrospective report but we've been asked to, but people are asking to have new things added to that report or the way in we look at things. And so, I mean, I'm going to be supporting this to go through, but maybe we need another resolution in there that says that we request staff to look at what are the things that, Toe and Ken have requested. It's, this is a retrospective report that's required, we just need to move on with that, and then if we need to do some more work for the next one to get the stuff that you're wanting, then let's do that. But it ain't going to be affected by this one.
Agree, Councillor Baker. Thinking of how we do it, because this is essentially, and this is always the hard stuff with our monitoring report versus a sort of an action plan. This is really a snapshot in time of a lot of important information. And this is going to help with the long-term plan and the funding that goes into this area, and it has in the past. I'm kind of having my speaking turn now, but I'll try not to. But I think we do need to, if we can put it'll have to be a kind of catch-all resolution so it doesn't put Member Ashby in a difficult position. I think it just needs to say something like report back on options and options and actions to go forward to the 10-year budget. Would I don't.
We'll draft something.
Yeah. Well,
I have some suggested words, which would be acknowledge the need to move more quickly on some of the issues raised to line up with the long-term plan, and seek further report on how we do that. Does that meet what you're looking for? Because
sorry, we'll get something typed up to add. It does need to be kind of broad because there's far more to discuss that we've actually discussed here. So it's coming anyway, but I think it's important to acknowledge the discussions we've had here today. So we'll have that up. Right, Member Ashby.
Thank you. If it's helpful, I can abstain from resolutions if there's a conflict that arises from any drafting. But look, from my perspective, I sat through this for 2013. I sat through this for 2018. I'm sitting through this now. I'll probably sit through it in another 5 years. It's nothing. It's not a reflection on the officers, but this just to me is just a tick box exercise. This is a nationally significant area. It's supposed to be enhanced. There's no coordination. We've been asking for, and this is why we've been trying to get the deed moving, to set up a steering group, a governance group, that could potentially be a committee of council under the LGA, whatever the mechanism, that overseas, because the Crown has a role in this and they don't put any money in, they're off the hook. They leave the iwi and the council paying, holding the baby, paying all the money. And, my view is that they do have a role in here and they've got away with it for the last 15 years and they should be at the table contributing. They have skin in the game, but they've gone like that. So for me, we've been again pushing for this steering group, this governance group, to give strategic oversight of the implementation of the Act. You've got Watercare, AT. You talk to AT, I say, what's your policy on supporting this nationally significant area? They go, we don't have one, we don't care. That's the response. Pretty much quoting. So that's not good enough to me. So it clearly needs more after 15 years of the same. It needs more effort and more political oversight, more governance oversight. I see that being a partnership of the Crown, Council and iwi with local voice, so that the area gets the mana it deserves. So I won't be, depending on how the resolutions are framed, I can't, with good conscience, and again, not a reflection on the officers, I can't endorse a third of the same from my perspective. So, kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you very much, Member Ashby. Councillor Leone.
Oh, kia ora. I just want to tautoko the korero that Member Ashby has raised, and I just want to take into account that we have got the Tupuna Maunga Authority that covers all of our other maunga, but we don't have anything that covers West Auckland, and the co-governance model that we, I agree with the points that he's making there. If there's an opportunity for us to look at a steering group or some kind of co-governance model in the future for that area, I think that would be very helpful, and it's needed.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. No, did you have a question, Councillor? Okay. Okay. No, you've had your comment, but I think we get the point, we've had the C added there, acknowledge the need to move more quickly on the issues raised in the monitoring report and include this in the long-term plan discussions. That was already happening in some respects anyway, but I think for staff that are listening, and Megan and others will pass it on to those who aren't here today, but I think it's clear the issues are far greater than maybe what is acknowledged through the monitoring report. So we need to have a chance to discuss that rather urgently and get more done in this space. Because I think if I'm, I've seen fantastic work happening in pockets. If you think of Te Kauro Āmake and the Rahui, and then the work that's come through a partnership on Kauri dieback and reopening of tracks, obviously hasn't all happened perfect, but I think it's a really good example of something that can happen well and that does roll out well. Obviously the pest eradication and the birds coming back and safe swim and things that are all pieced together improvements that have happened, but if it needs to be far more holistic, and as Member Ashby says, if there are parts of the council organisation that are heavily involved in the ranges, such as resurfacing roads or rebuilding roads every time we have a storm, and they're not acknowledging the Act, or there are parts of other departments of council who aren't working with the same as maybe environmental services or whatever that is, then that's not the way we should be doing things. So it clearly needs a more holistic look, and I think what the monitoring report shows us is the success, but also the problems, but we probably need to understand how we move that from monitoring to action, and we do not want to be here in another 5 years having the same conversation. So I think this has been a good conversation, but clearly we need to do far better. And as Toe messaged me, we don't want him to be 100 years old before this is sorted out. So I will move. So Member Hennere's asked for a division. Are you still wanting to call the division, Member Hennere?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Cool. So we are voting the 3 resolutions up ahead, and Sandra will read them out. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Councillor Hills.
Yes.
Member Ashby.
Against.
Councillor Baker.
For.
Councillor Bartley.
Against.
Mayor Brown. Deputy Chair Dalton.
Against.
Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Ferry.
For.
Councillor Filipina.
Against.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Fully.
Against.
IMSB Member Henare.
Against.
Councillor Henderson is not here. Councillor Lee is not here. Councillor Leone.
Against.
Councillor Newman.
For.
Councillor Sayers. Councillor Stewart. Councillor Stewart, are you online? Yes, here she is. Councillor Turner.
Against.
Councillor Walker. Councillor Watson.
Sorry, I'm online now. Yes, I'm against.
Thank you. Councillor Watson. Councillor Williamson. Thank you.
Right. I don't actually know what happens if we don't accept a monitoring report.
It was lost, so we haven't adopted it.
Yeah. So that's fine. That's fine. I mean, it's obviously going to send a message, but I guess my concern is that this progresses nothing if we don't do this. So it's a bit of a concern that that's just lost. Yeah, so that's fine, that's happened, but the message is now that nothing can progress because we don't have the information approved going forward. So I will get some advice on what just happened here. And
Chair,
thank you. Yes, Councillor.
can we hear from the Chief of Strategy? This is a very odd situation. This is weird. I do not understand this, but look, the vote's been taken. Can the Chief of Strategy outline what this rejection of a report that's just been before us, a presentation's been made, what the implications are now, please?
Through the chair, thanks, Councillor Darby. Yes, so it's a fact-based report, so there's nothing more that we're going to be able to add to this. So the report's not going to change. So presumably, when we bring it back, presumably the same decision will be made again. I'd need to check whether we're in breach of the law if we don't adopt a monitoring report. But look, notwithstanding, I guess we will probably bring this back and maybe assist you to adopt it. Because it is just fact. That I think the concerns and questions are particularly around so what happens, and if there's concerns that we are not, we as a council, are not acting more quickly or strongly in certain areas, then that, as we're suggesting in C, is probably a long-term plan discussion. We will progress the matter of the deed of acknowledgement, as we've said, and that was requested that we do that offline, so we will do that and we'll progress that nonetheless, regardless of whatever's happened today. So, look, Mr Chair, there's nothing, there's no legal issues as such in declining this report, but the report's not going to change, the form of it's not going to change, so we'll just need to work as to whether we'll bring it back at some point or not. Thanks.
So can I just get clarification on the third motion that's been lost? Does that negate that? Does that say that the committee does not want to move quickly?
Essentially, it does, Councillor. So we'll have to look at that. Yeah, I mean, in general, the 10 votes against. I had no feedback pre this meeting, and I would have liked to have helped or known before this meeting how to help. So yeah, we are in a strange situation, but that's fine.
Sorry, through the chair. Look, we are now in breach then of the Act because it asks us to both produce a report and for the council to adopt it. So I think clearly what I will be wanting to do is to bring it back to you. The circumstances won't change, however, so there will need to be some ability for you to adopt it, notwithstanding the contents. So we'll work on that with the chair. Thanks.
Kia ora, thank you. Right, well, we will move to item 9 on our priority submissions for Auckland Council Group, June to December. Thank you, Adam. Yes,
Kia ora koutou. Yeah, just to quickly say that I'm Adam Morris. I'm Principal Strategic Advisor in the Strategic Advice Unit, part of APSR. And alongside me, I've got Denise O'Shaughnessy, who's the manager of my team. I just want to, I've not got a presentation, I just want to cover a few points just to re-emphasise some points from my paper that I've put forward. And that's just to say that we're here today with our report to seek approval for staff to prepare submissions that we've identified as priority government policy related proposals that we're expecting during the second half of this year. So if that list is approved, then staff in the appropriate areas of council will prepare these submissions as and when they come available, when they're open, and they'll take those through the normal committee procedures for approval. The submissions themselves, the substantive part of the submissions, they'll be considered by the relevant committees. And then just to remind ourselves here is that earlier this year that staff developed a process for identifying and prioritising consultations, which involves assessing them against a set of criteria. The list of prioritised consultations for the first half of this year were approved by this committee in March. And we've repeated that process again for consultations expected over the second half of this year, over the next 6 months. And it's those that we're seeking approval to prepare submissions for. So just to note that those are the National Planning Framework, which is part of the Resource Management System reforms. We've got the draft GPS on land transport for 2024. There's replacements to the Waste Minimisation Act and the Litter Act. And there's also regulatory proposals to restrict mobile bottom fishing methods for Hauraki Gulf. On that note, actually, I just would like to draw your attention to the amendment in the recommendation, which is in red, where we've included the regulatory proposals to restrict mobile bottom fishing methods for the Hauraki Gulf. And that's just to, for the recommendation to align and reflect the attachment A, which has all of the list of prioritised consultations in. So that's just to bring that in line with that list. Yep, so that's all I have to say on that. Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Right, are there any questions on this one? Councillor Walker.
Well, in the instances where we've got a watching brief, and I note there's a watching brief around the Three Waters program, emissions trading scheme, equitable transition strategy, and so on. I'm making the assumption that we're going to continue to apply ourselves in those areas, particularly around Three Waters, where the council has taken a position of opposition to the Three Waters, and of course recently as a consequence of the calamitous storm events, I think we've highlighted that it's even more important for council to have as much influence around our waters as possible. So are we updating our positions across areas, especially as it goes to, you know, the land use and the stormwater and other matters that have been heightened as a consequence of recent storms?
Kia ora, thank you for the question. Anything, so I can't speak to any specific consultations there, but just to say that anything that we've marked as watching brief is just, we don't have enough information to make an assessment as to how we're going to respond yet, but it's there because it's noted that this is potentially of interest and we need to keep an eye on what the content's going to be. So we don't have enough information on what that content is yet, and whether or not the recommendation would be it would be political or a technical staff response needed. So, yeah.
You fine, Councillor?
I reserve my right to comment.
Right. I have no more. Sorry, Councillor Darby.
Just a question. Oh, Megan, this popped out. Here she is. Sorry, I was just about to pose a question, Megan, and it's probably on the back of being, you know, former planning committee chair and being totally absorbed, swamped by the national policy statement, urban development, and knowing what that, how much life that sucked out of the council. Our, you know, work streams were deferred, are still deferred. You know, when we make these submissions, is there merit in actually highlighting to select committees and to ministries just how much resource is required to not just make submissions, but then actually to respond to legislation, and there's never any consequential or never any acknowledgement of the consequential spend, you know, once legislation is passed. You never see it mentioned in a paper. It's just assumed that territorial authorities are going to suck it up and reallocate resources. Communities are let down in various parts of the country, and at least this city. So I'm sort of wanting to get a feed from you as to whether there's merit on an ongoing basis to identify to ministry officials and select committees that there are consequences for councils and they're not just financial.
Kia ora, through the chair. we do, and we have done that in the past, but we don't do it consistently. So, for example, we don't consistently say it takes X amount of staff or time or money, but we absolutely have provided that, whether that was in written, but particularly in verbal submissions that usually the chair or a member of the committee will make. I think that's a really good point, though, and we're happy to perhaps take that as more of a standard approach to at least provide some clear statement that this will take resource, whether it's people or time or money and all of it. And there will be times where it would be appropriate to go, and it's going to be this kind of amount of money, or this is what it's cost in the past, or this level of resourcing required. So I think that's a really helpful point. We're happy to kind of include that as in part of our standard approach to these, if that's helpful, Mr. Chair.
Cool. It's helpful. Councillor Walker, do you have another question?
I've just got another question. As much and all as this committee may be involved, there are other committees and parts of council. I mean, I note that the Hauraki Gulf Forum should really be involved around the mobile bottom fishing methods. Equally, we've got the Civil Defence Committee that will be obviously involved with the National Civil Defence Emergency Management Review. And equally, we've got a Transport Committee, and I would have thought the DPS and land transport would be a collaborative process with that committee. So I've just got a question for the officers as to how we get on, particularly when there's a smaller, more nimble committee, and I'm thinking of Civil Defence that is going to have an overriding interest. Are we going to be involving them to a much larger degree?
Let's go through the chair. So just to reiterate, sorry, and I will come directly to that as well, that the focus here is actually on preparing the submissions, identifying what's coming up ahead of time, and agreement or approval, sorry, on preparing those submissions. When it comes to the actual developing of the submissions and the content where they would need to be taken through those appropriate committees, that's down to the staff officer who's responsible for that particular consultation. And on that, with each of these consultations, I have been in contact with the relevant team or the relevant staff members. So it would then be down to that officer to make the decision on the committee and how it's taken through there in agreement with that relevant committee. So yes, essentially, I guess is the answer in short.
Sorry, through the chair, has that answered your question, Councillor Walker? I'm not sure.
Somewhat, but it'll
kind
do.
Of. If I could just add that this is really we're just trying to do a bit of a clearinghouse for the submissions that we're going to focus on, but it's not only this committee that's going to be responsible for adopting or signing off those submissions. So they will go to the relevant committees as needed. This is just a bit of a clearinghouse report and process.
Oh, Member Ashby.
Kia ora, thank you for the report. Just a couple of questions from me. Obviously, some of these items are highly relevant to Māori and iwi, and so how are Māori experts drafting or otherwise contributing to your, or subject matter experts contributing to your responses? Second one is, within, while iwi input will be included in the submissions, the timeframes are tight. So what's the plan to fill in the blanks if you can't get it? Because it's very hard to get iwi feedback, even with a long time frame, because we're all so busy. So yeah, what are some steps there? And then the third one is just maybe a question and a comment combined, but feeding off the second question is to make sure, or a suggestion to work with our Secretariat, our MSB Secretariat, who are across some of these matters, to help you with that. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, and through the chair. So Just to respond to your first question first. During consultation process, any submissions, whilst they're being developed, staff will seek input from the Matarai, and also the IMSB Secretariat, and where possible as well, or where appropriate, feedback that we've received before from iwi, where that's appropriate. But otherwise, in general, we're not seeking or involving Māori experts or in that submission. And then I think, yes, your second question was regarding timeframes. I just want to acknowledge first, I think the timeframes are something I think we need a discussion on, that in terms of timeframes that have been made available for consultation feedback. They are unfortunately out of our control because they're generally, well, they are set by central government. So that is something we need to discuss. I think, so what does happen sometimes, and I know it's not an ideal situation, but sometimes a letter is sent out to iwi informing that there's a consultation happening. That's not helpful necessarily in terms of shortening the time frame, but what we're hoping there, at least that does, is raise attention that this consultation is happening. There's some opportunity to feedback through the central government feedback process. I think with regards to what steps we could take to try and help, I think with this, what we're trying to do is, well, we are putting together a forward plan ahead of time as best as we can. So what we could do, and I think the opportunity here is that we send that out to, we can send that out as an email to iwi, and at least then we're providing some time ahead of time where we can help people gauge what they might be interested in, and that gives hopefully us a bit more time and flexibility to engage with each other. Yeah. Okay. Kia ora.
Thank you, and apologies, Mayor Brown.
I think, is this supposed to be an exhaustive list of things you're doing? Because, I mean, there's other things, local government reorganisation, local bills, reparking fines, bills on the transport rules affecting congestion pricing, three waters, all those are floating around and coming into land that I'm aware of. And I'm not aware of a whole host of other stuff that's circling above me, like crapping seagulls. How do you get to know or make sure that you've got them all covered, or is this not supposed to be exclusive? I'm not quite sure. Just put it in perspective for me, please.
Through the chair, Adam, if you're okay, if I just take this, happy for you to add anything else. Look, a number of the things that you raised there, some of them are part, like we can advocate for, and we're part of the conversation with government to get some changes to that legislation. So the purpose of this report and these particular ones we've listed are the ones that we know are coming from government and that we know and we believe are the most important ones to focus our energy on as an organisation. There are always others, sometimes promulgated by us, or the conversations we need to have with government or provide you advice that you have with government then about changes, and of course we will contribute to those. But this really are the ones that are coming from government that we know are kind of coming at us, and we just wanted to let you know. So it doesn't stop. Some of the other ones that you're talking about, particularly if they gain some momentum in this next 6 months possibly, or the next couple of years. Yeah.
Okay, well I'll just want to make sure you get those listed down, because, for instance, the congestion pricing one is an interesting thing. At the meeting yesterday about the options for mass transit, which is either a light rail or a metro rail, one of the principles behind it is that we will have implemented congestion pricing. And at the moment, we don't have the legal ability to do that. And in fact, to make it work, we have to have the legal ability to do it on roads which are not ours, which are the motorways. And I'm told by the Minister that that is possibly underway, but it won't. The entire project relies on a change of legislation about which we only kind of accidentally found about.
Yeah.
So I understand that your job is quite tricky and you need a red alert somehow or other on these things coming up. But so what you're telling me is that that's your best effort, but you're quite open to have other ones added to it. So.
Through the chair, sorry. Oh, Mr. Chair, sorry.
I mean, yeah, I guess, Mayor, this is a list of what is officially coming. So, of course, like Three Waters, we've already done submissions on the Go to Select Committee. Congestion pricing, we have put submissions into the first processes. I'm assuming at some point it'll come back with an official recommendation from government, and then we'll get to submit again. And on parking fines and things like that, we're on the record, but they haven't come to us with new legislation. So this is just a list of what essentially government's telling us is time for us to submit. So they get triggered with, you must submit by March 22 or whatever it is, and then those will come through. So it's not like it's missing, they're in the background, but the staff will only be sort of triggered through this when we've been asked to submit. So we can obviously do stuff as elected members and you as well to government on, where is this, can it speed up or hurry up? But when it's officially, this is the mechanism. But once those things pop up, we'll definitely, what we're trying to do is triage, because unfortunately staff have had hundreds of things thrown at them by government, and it's all very quick and all over the place, and this is trying to kind of get a conveyor belt, I guess, of what's coming, so you can work on them before coming back to us.
Okay, thanks very much for that. It was just that last one, the congestion, it only popped up in a meeting yesterday, and it sounds as though they're acting as if it's already in place, which is bizarre.
Thank you, Mayor. No more questions. I'm happy to move. We've got a seconder, Deputy Chair, Councillor Dalton. Oh, sorry.
Comment.
All right. We have a comment from Councillor Leone, and I think Councillor Walker, did you still have a comment? Councillor Leone.
No, sorry, none from me now.
Sorry, thank you, staff. I forgot to ask you to come back. We appreciate the work you're all doing, and I know it's quite difficult. Councillor Walker, you have a comment.
Really just a comment to reinforce that we shouldn't just be sitting back in issues around Three Waters reforms. Once again, I'd say we should have a full-on campaign. Try and wipe the thing out. That requires effort, requires ongoing research to continue to redefine our position, especially after the flood events. So what is our current position on something against a background where everything has changed? So that is my concern, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And yes, we have been very clear on Three Waters, and the Mayor, I know, and Deputy Mayor have been working with ministers on what their approach going forward. And of course, we hope that things like the floods, which have happened across the whole North Island now, are being considered as part of what is next. So just once again, want to acknowledge the staff under huge pressure, especially the last 2 or 3, 4 years, to get us clear submissions in very short time frames. So this will help you all, I hope, that you can start progressing some of that work as it comes, as opposed to always having to react when you get you must submit in 30 days' time, when there's not often a committee to come to and get all the governors away to, and IMSB and Mana Whenua and local boards and everyone else to feed into those processes. So I know it's extremely difficult, but we do appreciate the huge amount of work that you're all doing to make sure that our voice is heard in these sometimes massive government changes or other legislative requirements. Well, thank you very much. All those in favour? Aye. Any opposed? No. Thank you. Right, we'll go straight to an update on our resolutions from February about the floods. Megan Tyler will give us an update of what she can and how it weaves in with all the other work we're doing. I'll just move the recommendation that's there at the moment with a seconder. I saw Councillor Dalton first, but sorry, Deputy Mayor. Cool, but right, over to Megan. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, if you don't mind, this is just a very quick verbal update for the committee on the work and the kind of long-term resilience and consideration of our response to the weather events earlier in the year. We are coming back to you very soon, but I do know that as the conversations have happened over the last couple of months, there's constant reference and questions about, we shouldn't build here and what's going to happen with zoning here and land use changes and, what happens into the future. And so I just want to briefly give you a verbal update. Very happy to take questions. Otherwise, as you'll hear, we are coming back to you very shortly. So look, in February, just to remind you, a resolution came through this committee to do a piece of work on long-term resilience and consideration of our response. So the immediate fixes, and whether that's hard infrastructure, working with people as well from a social welfare perspective, that started, of course, and is continuing, because that is absolutely the right thing to do in terms of the immediate response to the natural hazard or to the weather events. There's also been a lot of collection of data, analysis about what happened. We've stood up the Recovery Office, particularly as the Civil Defence emergency kind of moved off. The Recovery Office here at Council has been set up that links both central government partners and us and our other agencies and organisations in Auckland. It has a particular focus on short term. It is focused on recovery, on the immediate fixes, but is moving into some longer term items as well. And it enables that coordination of agencies as together we work through the impacts of the events. You've also made a decision lately, or at least progressing a program, particularly around stormwater, making space for water. While you haven't fully approved that program, you've asked for that work to continue so that you'll make decisions in the near future about that. So the immediate focus has quite rightly been on the immediate fixes, the things that need to happen and to improve the environment out there on the ground. And while that is going on, we have still been working in behind the scenes, both insisting in that a little, but certainly behind the scenes in trying to then get a conversation starting with you about some long-term impacts of this, because there are some big public policy questions for you as a council. And some of them are, what is council's role? What is the problem we're trying to solve, and what is council's role in that? There's public benefit and private benefit, whether it's buying land, taking land, changing land use rules. So a lot of this will have significant consequence over time. It's not just about making immediate fixes. Have the weather events changed your risk tolerance for particularly flooding events, but also erosion and landslips? And if that is true, what does that look like spatially? So will there be development that will not happen in certain places? Will it happen more in others? And are we talking all new buildings or just additions? So again, some really big policy questions for you to consider into the long term. Another part of it is, does the legislation allow you to make some of these changes? And if not, what do we need in order for you to make these kinds of decisions? And another really big part of all of this, of course, is partnership with central government. You can't and won't want to do this on your own. There's roles between central and local government, funding questions, precedent questions, accountabilities, not just for the immediate, but into the medium and long term. So look, really quickly, what we've been doing since, February, March, is that we have been part of the Recovery Office work, so we are working in with them across the group and into central government. We've been working across the group to understand and analyse the data of what happened, what occurred, and how that could help us predict or understand what might happen into the future. We've been learning lessons either by talking to people or by reading and examples of these kinds of events and the response to them, both examples in New Zealand, but also internationally, particularly across into Australia and some of the Commonwealth countries. We're looking at Council's current policy settings, again, our role in these kinds of things and options for changing that if that's where you want to go. And we're also completing some initial responsive action briefings. And you will have received an email from Sandra, I suspect, from the Planning Committee email yesterday, and that was the first one that we've done. And so that's a bit of a memo to you, giving you some advice and some briefings on what this might mean for Plan Change 78, so that's the intensification plan change and the coastal hazards plan change. There are 4 or 5 more coming out over the next week. There's one on climate scenarios, so again a forward, future-looking piece on climate scenarios. One on the socio-economic impacts of these events on our communities, because not everyone gets impacted equally. Key trade-offs, so how to consider trade-offs when you're thinking about these long-term changes in roles or changes in legislation and regulation. And the legislative framework, what are we working with at the moment with a view to then what might we need into the future. So we've been doing a lot of things, you just haven't seen it necessarily. And so I just wanted to provide that update for you. Next steps, 21st of June, it should be in your diary. We're going to start the first workshop as we talk to you then about, do you want to make some land use changes? Do you want to make some changes to the unitary plan to constrain development in some areas or make it bigger in others, to change your risk tolerance around, say, flooding, for example? We want to start that with you on the 21st of June, so in a few weeks' time. And then on the 29th of June here at the Planning Committee, Planning, Environment and Parks Committee, we will have a more comprehensive report that we'll speak to. You can obviously resolve against better than just this verbal update. So we're going to start coming to you very shortly. You'll start getting these initial briefings to get you thinking about some of these bigger questions. And I just wanted to let you know that that's what we've been doing. Mr. Chair, thanks for that. I'm very happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, happy to leave it till later in the month. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan. And I know that Councillor Dalton and I have seen a bunch and heard a bunch of the work of what's been going on, and the teams are all hands to the pump. Is that a good? Probably not a good analogy. On this, it is extremely difficult under a short time frame, and they are pretty serious issues. So, but I think the progress is good, and I think we should have some pretty good decisions to make in the next few months. Member Ashby.
Thank you. Just a quick one, and thank you. I understand there's heaps of work going hand to the pump in the background, but just a quick one, and to be fleshed out, to be fleshed out later perhaps. But the focus is on building or not building, as it were, in floodplains and flood zones and things. I'm also just mindful of the changing nature of the regulatory framework. So when we've got really large winter earthworks and the designs currently, for example, for the treatment devices is 25 mil rain, but that's been exceeded, 6 times in a month. Is that going to be part of that review as well?
Through the chair, look, absolutely. So land use and regulation, so the biggest regulation tool you have really is the unitary plan, and that's the zoning and land use requirements. But underneath that, or kind of in concert with, are the things like technical guidelines and those other requirements, some of which sit in the Building Act, but others are things that we have responsibility for as a council. So yes, it's the package. I think on the 21st we'll probably start focusing perhaps on the unitary plan, but technical guidelines and those other requirements are part of it as well. So thanks for that reminder. Thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Brown.
It's more of a comment than a question, but I'd like to support your statements, particularly the cautious approach. And I note under the item 4 that you have to be carefully considering the avoidance of creating precedents, because I'm asking that you keep in touch, particularly with the other largely flooded areas, the councils in the Hawke's Bay in particular, because I want to make sure that they also don't create precedents accidentally for us as the two ones that have copped the biggest bill. I'd like you to consider any comments that might be made about the Environment Court having the ability to override things where we've made good decisions, or rather what we believe to be good decisions. And lastly, that I have had some warning, although not about the content of it, but the government is due to announce their response on retreat payments shortly. And I think we need to be aware of that, to hopefully have a cautious approach there. The house prices have dropped by enough that if you could easily make a mistake where you offered more money than what they're currently worth, given the fact that the market is dropping in 20% lumps rather than 2% lumps. And so a very cautious approach in times where the physical and financial stability of the house market are both in trouble. So thanks. And so are you checking with those other councils? That was my main question.
Thanks. Through the Chair, yes. I mean, there's two elements to checking with them. One is obviously the immediate fixes and response. So the teams are certainly doing that. Yes, we have contacted them in terms of the broader or longer term piece, but we're also doing that through the conversation with central government and through the Recovery Office. And your point is really well made in terms of any announcements and I believe there has been an announcement lately, I just haven't seen it today.
It's just out now.
Is it from Minister of Finance, I believe, on some next steps around, yes, funding. And it's really important, I think, that you are part of that conversation, because it is a partnership approach. I suspect neither you nor the government will want to be fully have full responsibility for funding and all of these other matters. So it's a big piece of a conversation and policy that you'll need to think through very soon.
Better be a good negotiator, boss.
Kia ora, Councillor Lee.
Yes, I'm just a little bit concerned with some of the wording in the report, and I think it's absolutely important in the face of this disaster that we take a whole of council approach. I'm just a little bit concerned that the Healthy Waters strategy of managed retreat, or as they call it, making room for water, may be somehow undermined by, shall we say, intra-council rivalries. In other words, if Healthy Waters wishes to acquire properties as part of a future riparian reserve system, we should all get behind that. And part of the problem they're having to deal with is overly permissive planning rules and practice within this council, where we have time and again the major ones I'm familiar with, the houses badly damaged, tend to be infill and very, very close to water courses. Now that's a legacy of not this council, but of the past. But we should be very careful not to, when we talk about precedent, adhere to a precedent which is not taking into account the realities of geography, topography and climate in Auckland. Thank you.
I don't know if that was more of a speaking turn rather than a question, but I can say that the Healthy Waters team and Megan's team are working closely together on this. I've made sure of that in the last few months, that they are, but there will need to be a balance of how much and how far, and a budgetary one as well. So there will be a little bit of running before we can walk, because people expect this, but we're also going to need to put these plan changes, which will take longer, over Auckland in hazard areas while other work physically happens on the ground at the same time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ferry.
Thanks. I really appreciate the verbal update, and I wonder if we could just, by way of friendly amendment, put in there that it's a verbal update, because I think otherwise in months to come people might, scrounge around looking for a written update. So if that's okay with the chair. My key question is around, we are talking and getting advice on the work that is happening, but my worry is that we're not making that very visible to the public, and acknowledge that then is extra work for the people who are doing the urgent work, But I really wanted to explore that a little bit in terms of what comms support can be given to get this stuff out there to the public, because certainly that's something that I get a lot of questions about. And while I can answer those questions, because, you know, I know that that work is happening and you're sending us memos and stuff, it's the public conversation and the media information that needs to get out there. So what are we doing in that space, please?
Through the chair, look, I think that's a really fair comment, because I think in this, perhaps this long-term work, we've not been particularly focused on communicating that, in the sense that the focus has been on the immediate, and quite rightly so. I think what we are proposing effectively with this is a report on the 29th of June to this committee, where it will be obviously in public, and I would like to then work obviously with the chair and deputy chair in particular, but in terms of next steps, how we can best communicate that. I'm certainly keen for anyone's views, particularly yours, Councillor Ferry, on that. But I guess from my perspective, I think the focus has been on the immediate, and only now perhaps is it appropriate to start looking a little bit wider. But I think also if the government has made an announcement today, we are more. This is becoming far more of a focus of the media as well, about things like managed retreat and what does it mean into the long term. So it's naturally getting there, but I think it's a fair challenge to me in terms of how that wraps into our communications about what we're doing about it too.
So supplementary, if that's okay, Chair. I guess the challenge here is our traditional way of communicating amongst ourselves, between officers and us, are ways that aren't necessarily very transparent or accessible to the public. Not in a sneaky way, but just in that we usually don't put stuff out to the public until, you know, we've voted on a report type of thing. But actually in this scenario, there's a lot of work that needs to happen that's in that middle space between we're consulting you about it and we've made a decision. It's that informed piece. So there's that, but I would just also note that my very quick scan of a media article about what's been announced is that it appears to mainly apply to Hawke's Bay and not necessarily too much to us. It says that the 12th of June is when we will be more likely to have a clear picture for our area. But I guess the frustration for me is that I feel like there is communication we could be doing ahead of things. We just need to frame it as, you know, we're not sure yet, this is what we're looking at, and we kind of need to trust the public, I think, to understand those messages. So is there any sort of consideration of how we can put information out there with those caveats rather than not put information out until we're sure?
Through the chair, I happened to have a catch up with Matt Tucker, you know, our recovery office manager, this morning. And we were starting to talk, you know, in similar vein to you about how do we get some communication out there that doesn't necessarily put things in concrete, but as you say, enables the community in Aucklanders to kind of know where we're heading. So, yeah, I'm talking about, I think that's a fair point, and I'll go back and talk with Matt after this as well. Thanks.
Kia ora, Councillor. Really good points. Thank you. Councillor Darby, sorry, I dropped you off the list and you were higher up, so but now there you go. Sorry about that.
I'll remember that one. Thank you. It's good. Megan, just as we undertake this work, you know, it's the investigation of the flooding, and we're not just talking about flooding in the sense of a body of water built up. We're talking about subsidence caused by flooding where the water built up, but it wasn't, you know, visible to the eye, as a flooded area is. So we're taking into account all of that as well in the investigations and in the implications for planning responses, regulatory responses. I just want probably some assurance that this is going to be a real warts and all look, because I think it's going to probably reveal some unsavoury truths about our own planning regime, regulatory regime. So I'm mindful, you know, I've heard Healthy Waters in the last little while talk about wanting to, well, they seem to have rediscovered this incredible newfound enthusiasm for catchment management planning, but 8 years ago, they actually told this committee's predecessor that there wasn't a case to proceed with catchment management planning, and that was something like 2014 or 15 or something like that. So I think we need to sort of have it out through this investigation. It needs to be really candid about this council. It's about us. We can't shy away. I'm not suggesting that your team would be covering anything up, but it just needs to be revealing everything. I'm also aware in the regulatory area, because we're getting a lot of questions as to why didn't council do something about that concrete driveway or that impervious area that is greater than what's consented. And, you hear this from residents a lot. I know about that. Why didn't you do something about it? Well, we have a compliance unit that can't keep up with monitoring. Right now, it's not looking at things unless health and safety is at risk. We're letting a lot go. For how long have we? We haven't had more than reactive monitoring. So I could go on, but I guess what I'm giving you some examples, Megan, and I'm just really wanting some assurance that we're going to open this up in a really very real way to look at ourselves very deeply, and we'll look at others as well, like the people that actually the Mayor just referred to before, an example of how maybe wastewater, septic tanks might have contributed to subsidence. I'm aware of unconsidered tree pruning, possibly contributing to subsidence, or stormwater outflows, unconsented, contributing to subsidence. All of that. So it's internal and external.
Kia ora, thanks. Through the chair, yes, look, we will. Just let me know if you don't think we're going in depth enough. So I'm not sure that we might do as much as early on as maybe you're wanting. So can you just keep in touch with me about that? But there is no, the point here is to provide you advice, because if your risk tolerance has changed and therefore our regulations need to change, that's a big deal, and you need to understand the implications of that and the implications, whether that's on our people of Auckland, but also on this organisation. So we might say, yep, if you want to do that, that's great, but we can't resource, say, the monitoring of that, for example. So we need to be honest at all levels about what that could mean, and then you need to make those decisions, and that might flow into long-term plan or funding decisions as well, or some kind of prioritisation decisions too. So appreciate the feedback. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Now, I have no more questions, so just briefly, if there's anyone has a comment. No. Well, I just briefly want to thank Megan and her team and everyone who's been working on this. I think it was, just under 2 weeks after the floods that Councillor Dalton and I and others thought that we should have some pretty quick resolutions on this with support from the Mayor and Deputy Mayor. And the team were able to come up with a quick and dirty plan, which I think has gone forward, and it will. It is hard because what may come back will be challenging and will be concerning for some people. It could mean that values of properties drop in certain areas. It could mean plan changes which mean that we don't allow building in areas that buildings already are. What does that mean? So I think a lot of people are looking for very easy solutions to what is a complex problem that's been 30 or 40 or 50 years in the making. A lot of the areas that flooded had homes built in the 80s and 90s which had no regulations around stormwater and things like that. So we are improving already with our current ways of building. If you look at new areas that were built up that didn't flood, but a lot of that data is needing to be looked at to make sure we make good decisions while we are also doing some infrastructure related activity. I'm on the Michael Woods Auckland response group, and I've been very clear to that group that it is going to be hard, but the comms together from the government and the council and whoever else needs to be clear to people, because I think at the moment we're leaving people in limbo because we just don't have the information or the ability to tell people, yes, you'll stay, no, you'll leave. And what it looks like from the numbers that, we've got thousands and thousands of people affected across Tamaki Makaurau, but it may only be hundreds that have some sort of support come to them through projects or through buyouts from government. So those are going to be tough conversations. It will come down to potentially more safety than damage to a home, and what was on your limb before, and all those really hard conversations we've all been having individually. We do need to do it in a structured way, because otherwise we could cause a domino effect of other really concerning outcomes for communities. So it is tough, and we know people are waiting, but I think this is a lot faster than maybe we would normally do, and we will look to have plan change around coasts, flooding and hazards. And we obviously got the delay to those points through Plan Change 78, but it's important again to acknowledge Plan Change 78 cannot downzone from the current place, so we will need to have other plan changes that come at the same time or close to those changes to mirror or change what and where things can be built in our community. So thank you, and thank you for bearing with us. I know that everyone wants the information now, but it is coming and there's a lot of work being done, but please feel free to send through questions and concerns to Megan and others, and that'll get disseminated out. So thank you. All those in favour? Anyone opposed? No, thank you. We've got the summary of planning and environment, parks, community information. Thank you. We've got mover, Councillor Walker, seconded the Deputy Mayor, Desley Simpson. A question, Councillor Darby?
I have raised a number of items that were absent from the forward work program. That's what we're discussing, aren't we? The forward work program, 11? Yep. Can I get an update, just as to where and when we're going to hear from? I think I raised about nine items that aren't on the forward work program, and I'd really like to know. And the other thing, Chair, is at the beginning of this agenda, it's dropped off the agenda as to what the remit of the committee is. Yeah. And I think it's really helpful to have the remit of the committee in front of all the governors to remind us what our job is.
Cool. We'll make sure we have the terms of reference back on the agenda. I think we've had discretionary budgets. So I didn't vote for that. Right. We will get some information on the work program through to you, all of us, Councillor Darby, and we'll ensure we have the list that you provided last meeting, and how we can fit it all in is the key thing. The staff are under pressure, and we did plan quite a lot of good planning in January, and then we had the floods, and it's been a tight or three. And everything else that's gone on, but take your point. All those in favour? Any opposed? Thank you. Right, we're going to we might just have a 5-6 minute break, come back at 12:30, and we've got the confidential item.
Yes, you just have to move to confidential.
All right. Councillor Walker, second to Councillor Henderson to go into confidential. All those in favour? Aye. Any opposed? No, thank you. Thank you to everyone who's online and watching. We'll now need to move to the confidential link on the Teams.